It was 16 minutes past 5, Earth time, on Saturday, the 23rd of November, 1963, just a day after the assassination of President Kennedy, when Doctor Who first materialized on BBC television. Squeezed between the football results and the telegoons, a legend was born.
Have you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the fourth dimension? Have you? To be exiles? Susan and I are cut off from our own planet, without friends or protection. But one day, we shall get back. Yes, one day.
Hello YouTube, this is Sadako24 here. Now, some of you may notice that I have done quite a few videos on Doctor Who, and a lot of them do take, and a lot of my videos have taken quite a pessimistic tone about the show, about the future of the show. And I explained why I think a lot of fans were losing faith in the coming revival. At that point, we were still awaiting the very first of the David Tennant specials. We were awaiting the big 60th anniversary event, and I talked in that about how a lot of the PR about what was coming up seemed to be more discouraging than encouraging. A lot of fans who'd really hated Jodie's era, but thought that, that Russell T Davies was going to be the one to save it and was going to get the show back on track. A lot of them started to feel kind of, pessimistic, disillusioned. They thought maybe the show isn't going to be saved after all. Maybe the show's going to be more of the same, more of the same political partisan stuff. Now, of course, recently we've had the 60th anniversary event, and we've had the David Tennant specials. I'll talk a bit about them. But first, let's get to the anniversary. 23rd of November, 1963, of course, that's when An Unearthly Child was first broadcast, Doctor Who first began. At the time, it was projected to not last that long. It was projected to last 13 weeks. At one point, it was even projected to only last 4 weeks. Then it ended up lasting 13 weeks, and then it ended up lasting 26 years. Then it went off air, and then it came back on after a long hiatus, and it's just about still running today. And so it's been 60 years ago. It's been 60 years that the show's been on air, but the show's been in some state of continuation. It's been a franchise that long. Despite that, I was kind of trying to get behind the anniversary spirit. I did try to get excited for the anniversary, for the 60th anniversary. I did try. I did. The 23rd of November is, an important Doctor Who date. And I thought, well, what's the best way to mark the occasion for me? Because, there's always that question, which story should you rewatch? And I have to say, I spent most of the day reading the novelization of the Daleks' Master Plan. I dug out my old copy of the Daleks' Master Plan novelization, and I was reading that, and I started to get really into that. I thought, I thought that commemorated it enough. I really enjoyed that novelization, actually. It's John Peel's novelization, released in 1989, and frankly, I think it's probably one of the best things to come out of the 1980s. I was, really enjoying that book, and the cliffhangers and the space adventure, the cliffhangers, all the stuff that made Doctor Who in the 60s so thrilling. And then, of course, later that day, there was the special screening of the Daleks in colour. This kind of edited, kind of remixed version of the first Dalek story.
Well, Doctor, can you see anything? Any sign of life?
No sign of life.
Oh, let me have a look. Fabulous.
Yeah, they coloured it up. Because the original is in black and white, and it's a 7-episode story, so it's pretty long. But they kind of trimmed it down to within an inch of its life, really. They trimmed it down to 75 minutes, which I thought was kind of excessive. I thought, I'm not terribly keen on the idea of editing it at all, really, but I thought if you were going to, then it should have been edited down to 90 minutes. 75, it's too it's over too quickly if it's 75 minutes. And The Daleks really is one of those stories that, it's best if it's paced out well. Now, I watched what they did with it, and there were moments I kind of felt it was doing something quite funny and clever, well, kind of inventive and clever with the editing. The parts where I felt like it wasn't really coming together, where it was jarring, was largely the stuff concerning the music. A lot of the music was just too overpowering, it was too intrusive, and there were moments where I think that they did fudge the pacing. They fudged the tension by kind of moving through the action too fast sometimes, particularly the scene where they've escaped the cell and they're trying to trick this Dalek guard into letting them pass. Ian's climbed inside the Dalek itself, and he's pretending to be a Dalek and saying, the council, has ordered the prisoners brought forward, and Susan has to improvise a kind of hissy fit panic attack that that forces the Dalek to take its attention away from contacting its authorities to try and apprehend her. In the original, there was a tension to it. There was a kind of prolonged, there was a ticking clock kind of thing. There was are we going to get through this obstacle or not? And in this, they rejigged it in a somewhat funny way, but also at the same time, it was like the original. It's lost something in translation, definitely. My other big problem I kind of had with it was the petrified forest itself. They coloured it, but I'd always felt that the petrified forest worked because it looked so grey and barren in black and white. And I feel like by colouring it, they'd made it look far less apocalyptic. It didn't look apocalyptic anymore. And, because the first Dalek story, I realised there's this kind of dreamlike quality to it. It's kind of almost this drowsy, dreamlike story. It's like you feel like almost like as you're watching it, you're almost waking up there's waking to various levels of consciousness within this nightmare setting. And it's like it's an unending nightmare until the very end, when of course they finally succeed. But that was the style of it. It had a very eerie tone, it had a very ambient tone, and so much of that was lost in the edit. And I think by the end, the more I thought about it, the more I thought it didn't really come together, and in a lot of places it was a headache. Like, there were some good bits in it. The moment where Barbara first enters the Dalek city, and the doors are closing on her, and she's being led basically into a rat's maze. In this version, they actually cut it with a lot more urgency, so you kind of you very quickly feel more trapped with it. It's more straight for the jugular take on that particular sequence, which I thought worked. The bit where the Daleks start to suffer from the anti-radiation drug sickness, actually, in a way, was strangely more horrifying in colour. You actually you got the sense of them growing increasingly sick. I think, though, sometimes in the attempt to modernise it, it feels like the parts that didn't quite work in a modern way jarred all the more. Like, for instance, there's a scene where Barbara's looking out the window and says, "Oh, I think I saw a man down there." Now, it's almost like a radio play scene. It's just, I see that figure in the distance. We don't cut to the figure in the distance. It's just like, they're telling us to imagine they've seen a figure in the distance. And I did think maybe they'd try to modernise a bit by cutting to, Alidon down below, just to just to attach what she was describing to a visual. It's it's show don't tell, maybe. I thought they'd do that, and I thought maybe that they'd have to modernise this fully, but they didn't, and as a result, it did show up that it was a clash of styles. That in the original, it was consistent that you could have Barbara perform a scene like it was a radio play, but it was jarring in the modernised version, because that seemed such a that part wasn't modernised, and it probably needed to be. But it also showed that maybe modernising it was a fruitless gesture. Despite that, it was nice to revisit the story, and in a way, and certainly it was nice to see the original cast and see them in colour. Oddly, that was nice. So yeah, I thought it was, in some places I thought it was kind of a cute experiment, but I don't think it really quite entirely worked. Not really. I'm probably not going to get the DVD version. I'm happy with the version we've got, really. I don't regret watching it, though, because it was nice to see the old TARDIS regulars again. That classic original TARDIS team. And, of course, it was also... it was nice to see them in colour as well. And watching, even a kind of a truncated version of that episode was kind of, it was a nice anniversary event, a nice kind of reminiscence on the show's beginnings.
Our lives are important, at least to us. As we see, so we learn. Our destiny is in the stars, so let's go and search for it.
Make your last move, Doctor. Make your move.
So they did that, and they also re-showed An Adventure in Space and Time, which I must say I love that documentary. It's a docudrama about the very, very first creation of the show. So it kind of looks at William Hartnell playing the role of Doctor Who and how that role really invigorated him in his personal life. And it also looks, of course, at Verity Lambert and the story of how she became the first producer of Doctor Who, and it was she had to fight against the odds to get the show made and to get the show to succeed. It's beautiful. I think I love Adventure in Space and Time. It's a beautiful story.
I saw the character of Doctor Who as an anti-establishment character, and I really do feel initially that's one of the reasons why people were drawn towards kids particularly, because they felt that here was an adult, who was as against the establishment as they were, and they sort of bonded with him in a strange way, even though they were sort of scared of him at the same time.
Like, I do love An Adventure in Space and Time, I do, but I just kind of, I just come to the end of the Daleks, and I was thinking, am I in the mood to watch more? Or, do I want to take a break from watching TV? I love it, but I can see it anytime I want. I'll watch it another time, maybe. I'm not really feeling up to watch it. Because I know that, Adventure in Space and Time, it's a long story, it kind of covers a lot of ground. So for a while I just decided not to watch and then kind of I took a break from watching. I thought, okay, turn that off. And then after a while I thought, what, I'll watch it after all. And I did, and very quickly once I started watching I got into it again. It's a brilliant docudrama. I think it's sadly Steph Coburn is the son of the writer of An Unearthly Child. Anthony Coburn wrote the script for An Unearthly Child, and Steph Coburn's quite a weird individual, to say the least. He's very strange. He really seems to hate the success of the show and being associated with it. And I mean, I've known about Steph Coburn for a while now. And I've kind of known he was quite weird for some years now, because he made similar kind of noise during the 50th. After An Adventure in Space and Time first aired, actually. Like he first kind of made noise back during the 50th anniversary over the An Adventure in Space and Time, and unfortunately, he's recently had an effect. He's actually managed to take An Unearthly Child off. Did he take it off BritBox or something? I believe. It also meant that when they were transmitting this repeat of An Adventure in Space and Time, they actually had to edit out pretty much all the dialogue from An Unearthly Child itself. Because, An Adventure in Space and Time, it reenacts that scene when, Ian and Barbara first enter the TARDIS. And a lot of the dialogue there had to be cut. So in this version, all you see from the shoot of An Unearthly Child is Ian and Barbara breaking into the TARDIS, forcing their way into the TARDIS, discovering the TARDIS for the very first time, the operators on the TARDIS doors buggering it up so that the TARDIS doors keep opening and closing, and they're trying their best to try and close them again. And then the sprinklers going off, because it got so hot in the studio.
I was only little when the programme started, but it seemed quite natural to me that my grandfather should be on television with a long white wig playing the character. But of course it meant that I could watch it without getting scared. I knew that it was going to be all right and that my grandfather would win in the end. He did a lot of personal appearances as Doctor Who. I think he really enjoyed doing that because he really appreciated all the fans and the fact that so many kids thought it was such an exciting programme.
Come along, my dear. It's time we were off.
But, I did love revisiting the special. And seeing the story of how William Hartnell was reinvigorated by the show, and seeing Verity Lambert, fighting a way to be respected in that industry. It was beautifully done. I love that special. It's so they had to make edits. They also did redo the ending slightly, in that it was a bit jarring at the end when David Bradley's William Hartnell kind of he's about to accept that he's got to leave, and he turns and he sees has this vision almost of the future, and he sees Matt Smith on the operating the TARDIS next to him, and he's kind of. Now, I never really liked that particular scene. That always kind of jarred me. It always kind of took me out a bit and thought, what's this supposed to mean? But the point, of course, was that it was basically reassuring him that the show was going to have a great future, and that it would always be in safe hands, seemingly. Suddenly he sees an image of Matt Smith at the console. I always found that a bit odd and jarring. I never quite thought that worked. I thought, well, it was almost suggesting that William Hartnell had kind of, future foresight of what was going to 50 years on, which that never really worked for me in the original, in any version of it, really. But in the repeat, they re-edited it so they actually incorporate Ncuti Gatwa there. I got to admit, when I saw Ncuti Gatwa, it was a shock to the system because I was expecting Matt Smith. Now, it's not unprecedented. There were interviews at the time in which, I think Mark Gatiss was asked to explain why he put that in, and he was kind of saying, well, it's basically William Hartnell looking into the future. We did it that way because it was the 50th anniversary, and at that point, Matt Smith was the current Doctor. But we can always, if we redid it, we could just replace it with whoever the new Doctor is, So that's what they did. They put Ncuti Gatwa in there as a kind of a, and he's the one kind of reassuring Hartnell that the show's going to be in safe hands. I was shocked when, so I was kind of expecting that bit. And then 10 years on, they replaced, in this particular screen, they replaced Matt Smith with Ncuti Gatwa, and he's there in his kind of in his kind of shaft attire, shall we say. And I was jarred. I was like, oh, that's not Matt Smith. I was expecting Matt Smith to be there, and it was Ncuti Gatwa, but it was specially filmed. He was there, and I don't know. I don't know if I sense a doctorish vibe from this guy. And certainly not the kind of Doctor that William Hartnell would recognise. Like Matt Smith is probably probably the closest they came to it with the Doctors. I was a bit jarred, but it did seem strange, and I don't know if I really sense doctorish vibes from Ncuti Gatwa yet. But here's the thing: these were niggles, and for the most part, I kind of thought, you know what, I'm happy with this. It kind of came to the end of the day. I'm happy with this as the anniversary day enough. And I kind of came to the end of the day thinking, you know what, I think I've commemorated the show enough. The show as I loved it enough. It probably wasn't the big event we were hoping. It certainly wasn't as big an event as the 50th. it wasn't. In fact, quite simply, it wasn't as big an event as the 50th. But that's the thing. I felt like, it capped off the anniversary nicely. But anyway, I was kind of getting into the anniversary spirit, I felt, you know what? It's good enough marking of the day, But a bit of that novelization. I watched the Daleks again in some form, and I watched that docudrama about how the show first began and how it became a success against the odds.
I never forget a face.
I know you don't. And in years to come, you might find yourself revisiting a few, but just the old favorites, eh?
Right then. Doctor, whoever I'm about to be. Tag. You're it.
Yes, the meat. I promise I can help him get home and then you'll never see me again.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point. Are you he?
The meat is all alone.
Now, for whatever reason, we were not going to get the Star Beast on the anniversary date. We didn't really get the anniversary programming on the main channel. We got it. It was kind of, you had to go onto BBC 4 for it. It wasn't kind of, Prime channel. It wasn't on the BBC Prime channel. It was almost kind of put in an obscure corner. And for whatever reason, Russell decided that he wasn't going to have the Star Beast, the very first of these specials. That was not going to be the anniversary special. That was actually just going to be, and it wasn't going to be broadcast on the anniversary date. And to be honest, it probably wouldn't really, story-wise, it wouldn't really fit as an anniversary story. Like, it does have a bit of a kiss to the past in that it, looks back on the Star Beast, the old 1980s comic strip.
The meat is all alone.
So it does kind of acknowledge, some of the history of the show. But it's not really an anniversary story. It's not an anniversary story in the same way that the Five Doctors was.
And what of you, Doctors? Do you claim immortality too?
That's
No,
very kind of you.
no, my lord.
Thank you.
All we ask that we be returned to our proper place in time and space.
It shall be done.
But, the Star Beast didn't really feel like an anniversary story, per se. It didn't. It didn't really have didn't have the past Doctors in there. It didn't really kind of go back to the beginning in any way for the show. Not in the way that the Five Doctors did, or in some ways the Day of the Doctor did, or even Night of the Doctor did. In fact, technically, you could say that Power of the Doctor was more of an anniversary story than the Star Beast.
Last time I saw you, you were half cat.
Man's allowed to experiment.
It wasn't the anniversary story, and it wasn't broadcast on the anniversary date. And I kind of do wonder, if it was broadcast on the anniversary, would it have been perhaps far more of a rating success if it was kind of shown as kind of, this is the anniversary story, this is the celebrating 60 years of Doctor Who. It probably would have felt like more of an event that had to be tuned into, I think. So what did I make of the Star Beast? I didn't actually see it live. In fact, I had a birthday party to go to that day, and I thought, look, this is a friend I've not seen in a while. These days, seeing them again comes first, because, I've not seen them in so long, and I certainly don't want to miss their birthday, So we went bowling with them for their birthday. Even though I can't bowl for toffee. But, so, I didn't rush home to see it. I suppose I wasn't quite that enthusiastic. I mean, I could have, left the birthday party early, shown my face early, and said, I've got to get home and catch Doctor Who. But no, I stuck around. I stuck around. And, I did have a kind of half a mind. Well, will I kind of show my face briefly and then nip off to try and catch the episode? or will I just wait until it gets repeated? I could have maybe gone early, show my face, and said I've got to rush back to catch Doctor Who, but I decided to stick around. I wasn't really that enthused to see Doctor Who, although I kind of, once I got back from there, I was thinking, I need to see it, really. I need to see what everyone's talking about on Twitter. Much of what people were talking about on Twitter was not good, of course. They were saying it was, it was all message, but I had, like, the trailer for the specials, the Star Beast particularly. The trailers look good. Trailers did kind of get me interested. It's like, it's that kind of, you get that spark of excitement from them and you want to see the rest. And so I did manage eventually to find a copy of it online. I was going to wait for the repeat the following day, but in the end I just watched it online. Managed to find it online. So anyway, I downloaded it from Dailymotion.
I had a best friend, and her name was Donna Noble, a Time Lord and a human.
And because I had to do that, I was a bit thrown by the opening sequence where you got the Doctor kind of, his whole body's in frame at a star backdrop, like it just seems to be hovering in space for some silly reason. And I mean, when I saw that, I did kind of think, well, have I actually downloaded the right copy of this? It just looked weird. Like if it was kind of, a head and shoulders shot and a starry background, that would work. But there was the kind of, it's like kind of just standing there slightly to the left, to a starry background, looking like he's just hovering in space. That was just so amateur. Like I said, I tried to go in with a positive mindset.
Hold on, let me help.
Thank you very much. Oi, do you mind?
So, Tennant sees Donna again, and Donna has this daughter, Yasmin Finney, who's, she's transgender, and some issues made of it. But the thing is, like, I've been told, like, this is going to be a propaganda fest kind of thing. And at first, it wasn't. It was kind of, it was raising the issue, but it did it in a way that kind of fit the fiction. It didn't feel like it intruded on the fiction. It didn't feel like it subverted the characters at first. First, the point was, Donna was soapboxing about the way her daughter was being treated because it's her daughter. She's going to naturally be passionate about defending her daughter. So it didn't feel like we were being lectured. It didn't feel like the author's hand was in that, telling us what we should think. It felt like it was the character speaking from the heart in a very, very believable way. So that worked. And, Sylvia kind of, asking, well, should I say the right things or wrong? That was the thing. It's not so much woke. It felt less woke and more kind of fly on the wall look at kind of how woke has made, people question what they should or shouldn't say these days. It felt like we were actually seeing an actual authentic discussion in the household. It felt like realish dialogue about woke. It wasn't woke, it was kind of almost people talking about woke in a very, very naturalistic, believable way. So that worked at first. And then, of course, there was Beep the Meep. And Beep the Meep was brilliant. I mean, Beep the Meep was, I would say, overall, Beep was the best thing in it. Definitely the best thing in it. Now, I have been critical about Russell T Davies in the past, but I did like the 10th Doctor and Donna dynamic back in Series 4. I liked that dynamic. I found, 10th Doctor and Rose a bit too... They could get really obnoxious at times. 10th Doctor and Martha, I just felt Martha was a bit insipid, frankly. But Donna I could cope with. Donna was kind of quite... I found her quite funny. I liked the dynamic they had. Yeah, they had a lovely banter between them. I thought they had a lovely banter. And so I thought, yeah, well, I would like to see them back in action again, actually. Yeah, I was happy to see them back together. Now, there were bits when the propaganda started to intrude a bit more, like the bit where Rose, Yasmin Finney's character, is kind of nagging the Doctor, well, are you sure you know the Meep's pronouns before you refer to them as a he? That was annoying, but you could treat it as a blip, and sometimes in Russell T Davies stories there are just blips like that where it's annoying, but let's move on. And usually the pacing in the story was good enough that it was possible to go on. I thought it was well paced. It was nicely paced. You get caught up in the pacing of it quite well. And I did like Meep.
My chosen pronoun is the definite article.
Like some bits, obviously, there was very cartoonish, action, like the whole business of the Doctor being able to create shield walls with the sonic screwdriver. That didn't really make sense at all. And that's typical Russell. He will invoke cartoon logic often when it suits him, without really explaining it. The business of the Doctor being able to create kind of these new kind of shield walls with the sonic screwdriver out of thin air. That was typical of Russell's cartoon logic. Always has been. The action was kind of exciting. It was reminiscent of the old Russell T Davies style. The pacing was very good as well. David Tennant, he seemed to be kind of, for the most part, he seemed to be kind of back on form. Although it did feel like he wasn't fully back, if you know what I mean. There were moments where it felt like he was, you could tell he was a bit out of practice with it, and he was kind of trying to, he had to kind of get back into that role, to be honest. Donna, Catherine Tate, Donna, she was back on form, definitely. She felt like Donna again.
That viper in the nest. I'm not going anywhere. We could sell Mad Paddington for £1 million.
Oh, no!
And it was nicely paced. Like, there was a nice pace to it. I got involved quite quickly, and I think, and I was kind of thinking about at the back of my mind, this is kind of what viewers would want from the show. Like, a lot of Jodie's era was not terribly exciting. It kind of promised excitement and then deliver nothing. Like, for instance, Ghost Monument. Like, the whole plot of that is you got this kind of this space race, and the final lap of the space race is where they've got to traverse this this deadly planet that's laced with booby traps everywhere. On paper, you think that's got to be an absolutely thrilling Doctor Who story, and in practice, it was barely thrilling in fits and starts, and it was boring for a lot of the rest of its length. Boring and bland. It was very vanilla. And the Star Beast, on the other hand, very, very pacey. It was kind of like, I feel like if viewers watch that, they'd think, yeah, okay, this is the Doctor Who I've missed, and the Jodie era is not.
Meet second level!
For the most part, I was behind it. And then, of course, there was the moment when the Doctor and Donna are separated. The scene where, the shield comes between the two of them, and the Doctor fears he's going to have to sacrifice Donna and awaken her kind of the Time Lord meta crisis and basically kill her. But for the moment, like, she'll have the Doctor's intelligence before she dies, and so she'll be able to complete the necessary operation to stop the Meep ship. Now, people said it was contrived. Yes, it was, but I think it was kind of contrived in a... Like, it was good. It kind of, the scene justified it. They contrived to make a good scene where the Doctor can't get to that control. Only Donna can, and the only way she can activate it is if the Doctor reactivates her memories. And he uses various triggering words. He knows what to say. Now, this was well done, I feel, because it was... The main thing was Donna herself. It was believable when she said, you know what, I have a daughter now. I'm prepared to sacrifice my life to save hers. So I'm prepared to lay my life down. I'm ready to do that. It's just 10 years on. I know what is important in my life now. I know what's worth dying for. And so the Doctor activates the, reminds her. Now, this could have been more thrilling if it hadn't been for the fact that in the end of time, we were it was hinted that Donna was going to remember again when she encounters all those master clones. It looked like her head was about to boil and like she was going to die. And then that's not what happened. She sent out this kind of mental shockwave that knocked the masters out and herself out. And so it turned out that, I put a failsafe in, she's not going to die. So it was a cop-out. It was a silly cop-out. It wasn't what we were expecting. And I think that kind of ruined it for ever since then, because now it's a case of, well, if it looks like she's going to remember, there's probably not much reason to care. Because there's probably going to be another cop-out. Also, we'd seen the trailer, and so it was kind of given away that she was going to survive this. There were the other specials. I did feel like they were going to do this scene, then it should have been later in the specials, where it looked like it might really happen, that Donna was going to remember and potentially die. There should have been a sense of this can really happen. I feel like watching it, I didn't believe it could happen. I believed the Doctor was scared it was going to happen. I believed that he was weighing up that choice, and that Donna was weighing up that choice, and she'd made her core decision. I'm prepared to sacrifice my life. Like I said, it could have had more impact with me if I genuinely believed Donna was going to die, but I think it was hard to believe it was going to happen because it was so early into this series of specials. We'd seen trailers that let us know there was more ahead. I mean, I think maybe they could have held back on that till a later date and to the point where it felt like it could really happen.
I don't know if I can save your life this time.
I think it felt David Tennant and they both performed it brilliantly. I could see what it was going for, and I feel like it could have worked if not for the fact that, unfortunately, the trailers have kind of spoiled it for us that we know that Donna is going to survive this. So there was never that kind of hold your breath moment where you think, oh my god, Donna might actually die here. That, and we'd already seen a cop out of that back in End of Time when, Donna kind of, it looks like she's about to remember the Doctor and the Master and the Daleks and everything from Journey's End. And then, all that happens is her brain sends out this shockwave that causes the Masters to collapse. She faints and she forgets it all again. So, we'd had a cop out before, and it looked like so it kind of seemed clear we were going to get another one, really. And unfortunately, it was after this when it was revealed that Rose's character had gotten all the regeneration energy, and she became the kind of miracle child who saved the day. I thought that was absolutely awful. It was like it's like one of those kind of jaw drop moments where you're thinking, what the hell happened? This story was really good a few moments ago, and now it's suddenly gone to crap. I remember at the time thinking, God, this has suddenly gone shit. It's just, the quality just jumped off a roof, jumped off a cliff, really.
We are binary.
She's not, because the Doctor's
male
and female.
And neither. And more.
Basically, the explanation is that when Donna gave birth to Rose, because of that, it's like half the regeneration, metacrisis regeneration energy went into Rose when she was born. And so that's kind of lessened the dose for both Donna and Yasmin to the point where it's survivable for them both, whereas previously it would have been, Donna would have got the whole lot and it would have killed her.
Because the metacrisis might have slowed down, but that thing is wrapped around your cortex.
Yes, we know.
Donna and Yasmin collectively start to give the Doctor this lecture about how he doesn't understand things like his female self would have. Chiding the Doctor about how, he's, if only he was still a woman, he'd understand women, and he'd understand, that women can let power go. It was just, it was horrible. It was just...
It's a shame you're not a woman anymore. She'd have understood.
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
I mean, it's not even coherent man-bashing. And the way it was scored as well, it was just so Disney-fied. Now, I was expecting... Like, I thought if there's going to be a feminist point being made, I thought it might be more to do with the fact that... Because I do remember at the time, when the Journey's End happened and the Doctor has to erase Donna's memories, there were quite a few feminist fans raising the objection of, well, look, Donna was saying no when you erased the memory. She did not consent to that. You know, you're supposed to respect her no. She wished more than anything to keep the memories and die.
Binary.
She had to forget everything she ever knew. Goodbye.
No.
She had to forget me.
Please, no.
But the Doctor kind of made the choice for her, and a lot of feminist fans felt that was wrong. The Doctor kind of, he should have respected her consent, kind of thing. Now, my view, of course, is, well, look, the Doctor had to make an immediate medical decision. Donna had not really absorbed the enormity of what this would mean to die. Like, you tell someone they're going to die, and you have to give them time for that to sink in, what it means that they're going to die. And the situation was far too urgent. The Doctor had to do something. And the important thing is, the basis of Donna's choice of I'd rather keep the memories and die is, but if you die, you don't keep the memories. If you die, you forget it all anyway. You lose those memories anyway. So at least if the Doctor does this, then you live. You lose your memories, but you live. You kind of restore to that previous state. Either way, the woman you became is going to be gone. But at least that way you live. And I thought maybe there'd be something along the lines of Donna saying, you should have respected my no when I said that, and maybe got into a feminist rant about it, and a feminist rant about, the respecting consent and that kind of thing. So, and the thing is, that would have been kind of, I don't know how I would have responded to it, but it at least would have kind of made sense for Donna to come out with something along those lines about having to go at the Doctor for that. And it didn't. What we got was it was weird. It was kind of more, it's a shame you're not a woman again, because she'd have understood.
Just let it go.
What it was almost saying was that when Donna had, the Time Lord meta crisis, he seemed to think that, the Donna and the meta crisis itself were inseparable, unless he kind of drained a memory of it all. But there was no way that she could separate herself from the Time Lord energy. And that was almost saying that the Doctor had this conception had this kind of misconception, rather, that a human couldn't just let that power go. Once they had the power of the Doctor, they couldn't really let it go. And so the scene almost seemed to be saying that, well, women can let power go. They can let power go. They can forfeit power because they're used to not being the privileged ones. They're used to not competing for power, which is complete bollocks. I mean, if that were true, then Hillary Clinton would have kind of lost the election gracefully, and we all know she didn't. The idea that women can't be control freaks, that they can't be power hungry, is bollocks. It's rubbish. And what it seems to be saying is that the Doctor can't imagine someone with that power giving it up. Once it's in them, they can't just let go of it. They can't just disperse it, because the power is intoxicating, if you know what I mean. Or they don't know how to disperse it. They don't know how to let go. And this is almost kind of them saying, well, we can let it go. We can let the power go because we're women. It's not important to our male ego the way it would be to you. And the thing is, it was the whole thing about, still trying to remind us how wonderful Jodie was.
It's a shame you're not a woman anymore. She'd have understood.
And it had that kind of patronising, lecturing tone to it, that kind of, we know better than you, we're here to educate you. And it was the same thing that kind of tainted The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe for me.
What are you doing? I am respecting her as a woman, sir. Oh.
It was a bit of a throwback almost. It felt almost like a bit of a throwback to The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. Now, it's a bit strange to think of this as a feminist episode because, you know, much of the first half of the story is all about making a joke about Madge being a rubbish driver.
Should we just bump into something?
No.
But for some reason, toward the end, Moffat feels the need to push this message about, you know, Madge is superior because she's female. Or rather, on this particular world they've come to, Madge is the chosen one because she's female and because she's mother.
Ha! The time vortex, your mother is flying through the time vortex. Be a little impressed.
It did feel like a bit of a, you know, this is Moffat desperately apologising for the fact that the feminists were taking him to task for stuff for quotes he'd made in the past about, you know, about his divorce, about his wife being pregnant, and, you know...
Amy actress Karen Gillan came to the show's defence a few times, saying she chose those skirts herself. It was just the fashion of the time. We know for sure that he at least had some opinions about her looks from the beginning. As he said, when he first saw an audition video of her...
I thought, well, she's really good. It's just a shame that she's so wee and dumpy. And then when she was about to come into the audition, I nipped out for a minute, and I saw Karen walking along the corridor towards me, and I realised she's 5'11", slim, and gorgeous. I thought, oh, that'll probably work.
Yeah, he said all these... He's on record as saying all these misogynistic things. This almost felt like it was him trying to apologise for that. And say, no, I can tell a story in which the women are the heroes and where the women are superior. That was... I look back on that in hindsight and think that was the first real hint that the agenda was being pushed. And that, you know, someone was arm twisting, you know, someone in the BBC was arm twisting Moffat or whoever the showrunner was to push that feminist message. Now, here's the thing. I mean, in fact, what really annoyed me about for example, the Doctor, Widow, and the Wardrobe was, in order for that to work as a kind of revelation, there would need to either be a hint that the Doctor was a chauvinist who didn't appreciate how great women were. You just think that's not the Doctor. You know, the 11th Doctor, he can be a bit crass and can make various faux pas, but you get the sense that the core of him, he is still an enlightened figure, you know, and comes from an enlightened civilization that has gotten past, you know, old chauvinisms. And so, you know, this isn't going to be a revelation to him of, you know, I didn't realise women could be that wonderful. And it's not a revelation to Madge's children because they already look up to Mum and see her as wonderful. So it's not like if they didn't appreciate Madge and this ending was kind of, oh my god, our mother we didn't appreciate is suddenly shown to be wonderful. That might have made sense, but it was just awful. It didn't, and there was no catharsis to it. And it just felt like, who's this message being preached at? It was being preached at the audience. And it's like, well, what's that got to do with the cast of the story? You know, how does this message relate to anything in the story? It just... There was no, you know, it was just rubbish. And I think that was, for me, the first sign that the agenda was kind of creeping in. In my review of the Davros, you know, the Destination Skaro, that Children Need Special, the Doctor comes out and he kind of says, a few moments ago, I was this brilliant woman. Now, my issue with that, I think, was you're kind of being told to think of Jodie as brilliant, and Jodie's incarnation is brilliant, and it's like you're being told to have this impression of the Doctor that just doesn't fit. You were being told that she was wonderful, but there's no particular scene that comes to mind that justifies that impression. So we're being told to envision her as something she wasn't really. There was certainly no way that it was demonstrated to us that was a fitting description. You know, it's never been shown that she was brilliant. You know, because you think back, you know, when was she brilliant? And I really do kind of come up empty, really. I come up empty. There are other doctors who are more deserving of the, where it would be more apt to describe them as brilliant. It would be more apt to describe Matt Smith's doctor as brilliant, or Tom Baker's doctor as brilliant. I mean, hell, it would be more apt to describe Colin Baker's doctor as brilliant than Jodie. That's how unbrilliant she was, if you know what I mean. It kind of did feel a bit like propaganda of, you should have really loved that period because it was a woman being the doctor, for the first time, and that makes her brilliant in itself, kind of thing, which, nonsense. Utter nonsense, really. But I kind of got it. I kind of got, okay, the new production team, they're not going to take a crap on the previous Doctor. Yeah, they're going to acknowledge that she happened, and they're not going to badmouth the fact that she happened. They're going to say, okay, we're not going to have the Doctor come out and say, I was this absolutely rubbish woman. I think it would have felt mean-spirited if they had. I saw that as, okay, it's an olive branch to the fans of Jodie. It's kind of saying, we're not going to just rubbish Jodie and forget she happened. It would be mean-spirited too, maybe. Certainly I would not want, David to have said, moments ago, I was this thing absolutely incompetent Doctor. And so I guess I thought, well, look, we got that in Destination Scarrow, fair enough. It was, a kiss to the immediate past. We didn't really need more than that. But at this point, it was kind of clear, no, we're still bigging up how wonderful Jodie was just for being a woman. The question is, why are we being told about, how superior Jodie was and all that? Because, a lot of people who follow the state of the show are kind of wondering, well, did Chibnall do all this propagandizing because did he do it to please the BBC? Did he do the Timeless Children to please the BBC? And, inevitably he lost ratings? Or did the BBC want him to keep the ratings, but he went he was so adamant on doing it his woke way that lost all the viewers, that the BBC actually got angry with him for losing the audience, as he did. Is it the BBC? Is Chibnall doing the BBC's bidding or not? Has he just become a sacrificial lamb for doing what the BBC wanted him to do anyway, in terms of pushing the woke agenda that alienated the viewership? And then the BBC can say, well, we've got to replace you then. And if so, because it's always been said the BBC had to bring Russell T Davies back to save the show, or Russell T Davies volunteered his services to save the show. You're thinking, well, is that true? Do the BBC believe the show now needs saving, and do they have a good idea of what needs saving, how to save it? Do they understand what went wrong, for that matter? And does Russell understand what went wrong, for that matter? And a lot of this, the final act of the story, does leave you with the impression that nothing's been learnt. And that nothing was ever supposed to be saved. This was supposed to be a continuation of the same message. It was supposed to get viewers back with the return of David Tennant. Perhaps, but the messaging is still there. The woke propaganda is still there, and is it Russell doing his own bidding, or the BBC's bidding, or Disney's bidding? It's hard to know. It feels like everyone's kind of pushing the same woke agenda now. And it's that kind of thing. You would think, after the failure of the Jodie Whittaker era, that the writers would think, let's not do that. Let's get away from that. That's what's losing our viewers. We've got to get our viewers back, not alienate them. I have to say, for me, when that scene happened with the, just let it go, or it's a shame you're not a woman, it was cold water over the whole thing for me. It was like, yeah, I was enthusiastic for what was ahead, and now I'm just dreading more of this. It's not really Tennant and Tate back together. It's Tennant and Tate, being puppeteered to be, the puppet spokespeople for the woke agenda. It does make me pause to wonder how true it is that Russell was kind of drafted in to save the show. Like, it was a kind of contradictory what we were hearing. We were hearing, of course, that Chibnall was cooperating with the woke agenda of the BBC, but also that he was fired for losing the viewers based on the fact he was kind of pushing that woke propaganda. And there was the hope that whoever was taking over now was going to realise that that woke propaganda does not sell in terms of audiences. Audiences are going to tune out. At some point you're going to say, okay, do you want to preach a message, or do you want to actually have a viewership at all? And, because you can't have both at the same time. You can have one or the other, but not both. A lot of people thought, well, that's what the BBC have been forced to conclude, that they need fans watching the show, and in order to do that, they can't alienate the fans with this propaganda anymore. And so there was the hope, okay, well, Russell, he's probably going to get it right. He's probably going to get the show back to what it was. I mean, Russell was political, but it was the hope that it would go back to the kind of political approach in Doctor Who that, won the majority of hearts and minds to the show. And alienated the fewest, if you know what I mean. Like, okay, I mean, back in The Doctor's Daughter, the Doctor, Donna did kind of say, did kind of liken it to the fact that the Doctor was experiencing dad shock. So she kind of was saying, in a way, you're having a male reaction. I can tell because I'm a woman. I understand it in a way that, you're in denial of the fact that this is what's going on with you. That was probably the closest we got to this scene, but this was even a step beyond that. It was kind of, this went beyond, what we got in the Destination Skaro. This was outright the companion saying, you know what, you're not as brilliant as Jodie was, and you're not as brilliant as the female Doctor would be. Like, it just didn't make sense for Donna to say that at all. And so it did feel like, it was the propaganda talking in that scene, and that just didn't feel like Donna at all. This wasn't Donna. This was propaganda. This was just looking for any angle to denigrate the male Doctor on, and it didn't even have to make sense. Russell just seemed to subscribe to this view that there's a problem with the male ego, and it's somehow the problem with the male ego is not with the female ego.
Now, Sherlock was guilty of something similar of this between the sort of break between seasons when they had their special, in which they went back to old-timey England, the original style Sherlock, and the entire thing ended up being one long, drawn-out plot just so Sherlock and Benedict Cumberbatch could virtue signal on behalf of Mark Gatiss by saying that this is the one war we need to lose, because women are slaves. It stopped being a Sherlock Holmes story, and it started being a Jezebel article. And no one's interested in this.
Point is, though, it seems like no matter where we go now, it seems we're getting that message being pushed constantly. This disdain for the fans, disdain for, the general public who aren't behind the message. And it's like, we're being, it's like this message being pushed to the kids of, yes, women are, girls are superior. Girls get it in a way that boys don't. Let the girls know they can be great, and they're wiser than boys and that kind of thing.
Hello. Just passing by because I got a bit lost. It's funny. 60 minutes ago, I was this really brilliant woman.
Now, the other point is, of course, that, with various events have kind of vindicated the feminist types. First, there was the election of Trump. No, first of all, before anything, there was Savilgate. Then there was the election of Trump, and that was kind of when suddenly there was a vested interest in the media of feeling like we've got to kind of prevent this happening again. We have to teach the kids, we have to teach the boys that they're inferior to girls. And they should never get any ideas about, having male privilege, having male power over women. And, we should teach them, to reject any kind of chauvinism that gave rise to Donald Trump. We should have to teach them that chauvinism is bad. And, male ego is bad. And, teaching them that all the things about Trump were bad. and that they'll grow up and they'll never elect a Trump again, and they'll never, maybe even there'll never be a Jimmy Savile again. It's this kind of agenda to try and try to make the world make the world a better place by indoctrinating the kids to abide by feminist mores and morals.
Like, this is 2023, this is our lens, this is our eye. Things used to be in black and white, they're not in black and white anymore. But the world changes, and when the world changes, Doctor Who has to change as well.
So yeah, I didn't like it. And I very nearly thought I was done. But for whatever reason, I did give Wild Blue Yonder a look. It was coming to crunch time. I was aware it was about to broadcast, and I'd already gone through an ordeal of trying to track down a copy of the Star Beast, and I thought, well, if I miss it and regret it, then I might not get a chance to see it. So I did decide to watch it. And I have to say, I thought it was actually very good. It was it was a marked improvement. I really liked, the dynamic between Tennant's Doctor and Donna. I love the eerie feel of it. I love the eerie sense about the alien villains of the piece, the telepaths, and the fact it was set at the end of the universe, and that there was a mystery and enigma to it all. And it looked like the Doctor and Donna were truly stranded, and they had to pose a question for them. Well, what if they can't get home? I thought it was very, very well done. It's kind of like Russell T Davies, but doing a Moffat story, which was good. It meant that Russell upped his game, I feel. I did enjoy the story, actually. I rated it by a lot. I did notice, though, that it got a very, very Marmite reaction from fans. It does seem to be one of those stories that you either loved or hated. And I was more in the love camp. A bit like Rings of Akaten. I loved that, and a lot of fandom hated it. So yeah, I did actually rate it. I thought it was good. But that's not really the issue here. The ratings have come in for both The Star Beast and Wild Blue Yonder, and they're not terribly good. The Star Beast hovered around the 5 million mark. So it was it didn't do all that much better than Power of the Doctor. And Wild Blue Yonder actually saw a loss. It actually dipped down to the 4.8 million, I think. The ratings haven't been as successful as we were hoping. Because everything seemed to be banked on this. Everything seemed to be banked on that bringing back David Tennant was the surest way. It was a desperate move. It was a shrewd move. It seemed a shrewd move, though, of, after the rating slump of the Jodie Whittaker era, where it started on about 8 million, and then it was down to 3 million by Legend of the Sea Devils. Like, even a concept like Legend of the Sea Devils didn't seem to excite the fandom into tuning in. The ratings were disastrous. They were it was like the last days of the 80s again, only worse somehow. So whatever Russell T Davies did with the show, he had to get the ratings back, and bringing back David Tennant seemed like, and Catherine Tate seemed like the best way of doing that. It seemed like, okay, David Tennant was a really popular Doctor. He was absolutely adored by, the new series fans. A lot of fans of the new series, the ones who started watching during the new series, who loved Russell's era, have always thought of the David Tennant era as their golden age. And I'm the opposite. I actually really liked Matt Smith's Doctor a lot more than Tennant. But it wasn't as popular as David Tennant's era, and the only time it really got really big ratings was Day of the Doctor, in which Tennant came back, and of course it was the anniversary event. And Day of the Doctor, that was a ratings boost. You had David Tennant back in it. Everyone tuned in to see David Tennant in action again, and it was at the cinemas as well. So it was a chance to experience Doctor Who in a cinematic way. I have to say, I never got to see it at the cinema. That's one of my regrets. I would have loved to see it on the big screen, really. But everyone wanted to see Day of the Doctor. That was the big rating success, and there is a feeling, and in hindsight, it looks like that was the last of its kind. It was the big ratings the show had gotten were the new series have gotten, were Voyage of the Damned, Journey's End, End of Time, and Day of the Doctor. And it was like that was the pinnacle, and I don't think there's been anything since then, since 2013, that's seen a ratings peak like that again. You know, and the days when it was getting those ratings are getting further and further away. You know, Capaldi's era didn't do terribly well in the ratings. Jodie's certainly didn't. Jodie's did worst of all so far. So, you know, it seemed logical. Well, you know, if you want to get the ratings boost, bring back David Tennant. It worked in Day of the Doctor, it'll work here. And, you know, and also I think, you know, the theory was sound, I think. It was kind of, this is the show you remember. You probably, you know, a lot of people have clearly tuned out of Doctor Who. And certainly no, it was like this for me with the X-Files. Once I stopped watching the show regularly, I didn't know, it was difficult to start watching it regularly again, because you almost felt like you probably would have inevitably missed a boatload of backstory by then. And I think that tends to be what keeps people from tuning in again. And I think, you know, a lot of people have said this, that Moffat made the show too convoluted and complicated.
It's your daughter's name in the language of the forest.
I know my daughter's name.
Except they don't have a word for pond. Because the only water in the forest is the river. The Doctor will find your daughter, and he will care for her whatever it takes. And I know that. It's me. I'm Melody. I'm your daughter.
Okay, Doctor, explain what is happening, please.
Mel's short for...
Melody.
Yeah, I named my daughter after her.
You named your daughter after your daughter.
Took me years to find you two. I'm so glad I did. And you see, it all worked out in the end, didn't it? You got to raise me after all.
You're Melody.
But if she's Melody, that means that she's also...
Shut up, Dad. I'm focusing on a dress size.
But the thing is, you know, bringing back David Tennant, okay, that seems to kind of get around that hurdle. It seems to get around that hurdle. It's like, well, look, ostensibly, you're being given the Doctor you remember and Donna. And they've not been in the series since the end of time. You know, so basically, it almost seems to be saying to the audience, you can tune into the show again and feel like you've missed nothing between when you last watched the show in 2010 and now. You know, if you stop watching the show when David Tennant left, then you can watch the show and watch this episode and feel almost like you've missed nothing, and like it's just, you don't have to worry about what's come in between it all. You can just watch this fresh. It's, you know, it's a clean slate way back into the show. You know, a lot of people watch Donna's final story, final adventure with the Doctor, where the Doctor raises a memory. You know, so it's kind of saying to the audience, well, if you wanted to see what became of Donna after that, then tune in. You'll see what becomes. You'll see if Donna ever does remember the Doctor and what's happened to her in the years since. So it seemed like, you know, it was a very, very shrewd move. Now, some said it was kind of a bit of a desperate move. I guess it was, but things were desperate. Things were very desperate. I mean, like I said in the explaining the apathy video, I was saying, you know, it was so bad, you know, that it would have taken a major repair job, a major salvage job to get the viewers back. Like, the kind of things that the show was doing to try and gain ratings again toward the end. And it did, you know, because Jodie's era did try to pull out all the stops. It did bring back, you know, it brought back the Daleks, obviously. It brought back the Sea Devils in Legend of the Sea Devils. It brought back Tegan and Ace for the Power of the Doctor special. Like I said, when the Legend of the Sea Devils, leading up to that, I did kind of expect that one to maybe do, you know, they had the pitch of, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean with Sea Devils. I thought, you know, that's a winning pitch. I was surprised it didn't do well in the ratings. that it just seemed to be kind of, that there wasn't the spike in viewer enthusiasm I thought there'd be. And it kind of did suggest to me that the damage had been done, really. Like, the damage had been done to the point where even something like Legend of the Sea Devils wasn't going to draw them back. Now, Legend of the Sea Devils, I thought was a rubbish story, but its pitch, Pirates of the Caribbean with Sea Devils, that sounded like a must-see kind of story. That sounded like, the kind of thing that everyone would want to see, but of course it didn't. And it was like, it didn't see any kind of spike in ratings at all. The ratings were just as low. Now, Power of the Doctor did slightly better because it brought back Tegan and Ace, and it was a regeneration story. So that made it more of an event story, I suppose. So that got 5 million, and it seemed like if you were going to build up more momentum, you needed to bring David Tennant back, the surefire, audience grabber, or at least he was back in the day, and so it seemed to make sense that he would still be an audience grabber now. So the idea is, because you've got to boost the ratings in order to try and at least ensure that Ncuti Gatwa has a residual larger audience tuning in to see him. And there was the fear, of course, that if you just gone straight from Jodie Whittaker to Ncuti Gatwa, you wouldn't have got that. So, like I said, it seemed on paper like, a perfect way to get the viewers back. And yet it hasn't really worked. Ratings-wise, the show's not that much better than Jodie's last story. I've kind of been forced to ask myself why that is. Why it is that it's not worked. Whenever a show loses ratings. There are millions of people who stop watching a show. Not everyone who stops watching that show is going to have the same reason to stop watching the show. And their reason's probably not going to be so predictable or so cliched. It's like, I talk to fans who really hate the current era of Doctor Who hated Jodie's era and who are not really loving this revival either. And, one thing we can all agree is we're not enjoying the show. And that's probably, if we look at the ratings of the Jodie Whittaker era, it did seem to show a steep decline. People just aren't tuning into the show anymore, it seems. And for much of the Jodie Whittaker era, we saw a very, very kind of defined decline in the show's ratings, and moreover, an almost irreversible decline. I mean, it was such a kind of, it was so downhill. You could have. It almost looked like the kind of decline you could take a skiing holiday on. And many of us have come to the conclusion, well, viewers are no longer watching it for the same reason we're not watching it. We're not enjoying it. But some go beyond that too. Well, we're not enjoying it because of the propaganda. That's why the woke propaganda and the preachiness. And so people are going to say, well, that's why everyone else has stopped watching it. The thing is, none of us can really know that for sure. Sometimes it's just hard to say, and sometimes there are no real reasons you can point to as to why people stop watching a show. All we can do is theorize. Some things just fall out of public appeal. So yeah, a lot of fans are saying their problems with the show are political, but they're fans. And, quite frankly, a lot of the general public are probably quite fickle about the political stuff. Most of the general audience probably don't know what words like woke mean. And they don't really see what's wrong with being woke. They probably just watch the show and think, well, it's not David Tennant as the Doctor anymore, so we're less interested. It's not an actor like Peter Capaldi playing the Doctor anymore, so we're not interested. Or just a case of, well, it's just boring now. And I think this applies to Jodie as well. Like, I think a lot of fans who have said, well, the problem is Jodie's Doctor is just very unappealing. Or she's just, most of it is just that she's fairly a bland actress. She doesn't really have the gravitas of the Doctor. She's clearly not really researched the role of the Doctor. I mean, there was a bit of a rating spike with her first episode because there was that curious novelty about, the first female Doctor. It was kind of billed as an event in itself. It almost kind of worked as a publicity stunt, I suppose. But not much more than that. And I think people kind of watched it and they were like, she's not a strong personality that keeps you watching week after week. She doesn't have the presence, the kind of, the iconic presence that keeps you interested in this character. I mean, the only point I think in Jodie's era where you could measurably say, the public spoke was during the scene in Can You Hear Me? The final scene where I believe the story is kind of, it's based on every character has to reckon with their personal demons in some way. Yaz has to reckon with her demons, and Graham has been reckoning with his demons. In the end, he feels like it's time to tell the Doctor his worst fear. And his worst fear is that he has had cancer in the past. He underwent chemotherapy and he recovered, and Grace was there for him during that time, and it was like, and Grace was taken away. So it was kind of, it was that poignant speech at a funeral of, I was glad to have I was looking forward to my spending, I was given this prognosis of you're going to live after all, you're going to have the rest of your life. And he was like, I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with Grace, and I'm not going to now. And in Can You Hear Me, Graham confesses that he's still scared that the cancer might come back, that he might relapse, and that, the fact that he's always got that worry, of that shadow about his mortality. And her reaction, he's saying, look, I just feel like I should talk about it, and I felt like I talked about it to you. I am looking to you to talk to. And Jodie's reaction, I suppose you could charitably say what the writers were trying to do here was reflect on the fact that sometimes it's hard to know what to say when someone wants your advice and you're not too sure what to say. You feel like maybe I can't tell them anything reassuring. Maybe I can't find the words. You could also charitably say it was an attempt to show the alienness of the Doctor. But, Jodie's reaction, of course, is that she says, I should say something reassuring, but I'm a bit socially awkward, so I'm just going to look at the TARDIS and, I'll come back to you when I've got something reassuring to say. I mean, if you watch the clip, it does seem like, the final scene does play as though Graham is kind of accepting that, Jodie will think on the best response, that she'll come to an answer of some description. But to a lot of people, it felt like a callous snub. And a lot of people did phone in saying this was such an insensitive handling of the topic of cancer and, the fears of cancer. It made the Doctor seem undoctorish. Now, I quibble on that because, frankly, I don't think that I've seen the Doctor being written insensitively many times before. I think it would be a lie to say the Doctor's never been this insensitive before. The Doctor certainly has. If you go back to Brain and Morbius, there's a scene where Sarah is blinded by the Sisterhood of Khan, and Sarah's afraid she's going to be blind for the rest of her life. She's just going to be consigned to spending her life selling flowers like the old blind ladies in London. And the Doctor actually says to her, are you going to feel sorry for yourself? Now, to a degree, you can say, well, the Doctor doesn't believe it's over. He's actually, he's giving her a bit of tough love and saying, look, stop resigning yourself to the worst. We're going to sort this out. You could say, but it's still quite insensitive. It's kind of more insensitive than what Jodie said in response. It's certainly not as insensitive as some of the stuff we got from the 80s, like in The Twin Dilemma.
You don't even know what a Peary is, do you, Perry?
It's post-regenerative trauma. He tries to choke Perry to death in a psychotic, delusional fit. He believes she's a spy or something, and
Well, we all know the fate of alien spies!
Just loses it with it. He goes berserk and tries to choke her, and as she's recovering from it, and he doesn't even remember doing it, and she's saying to him, what you did was horrible. She's really fighting for life, and there is a moment where he says, "Oh, don't exaggerate." And I'm thinking, yeah, that's far more insensitive, and that's far more, Perry is just as much in fear for her life as Graham was. I think part of the problem, though, is that was a long time ago, and also, much of the much of the promotion about the new era of the show did seem to be the Jodie era did seem to be making out that it was almost saying, yeah, well, we've done away with the more callous, kind of, quite cavalier masculine doctors who sometimes could be crass and insensitive and, didn't understand women, didn't understand feelings. And now we've got we've got a female doctor who's billed as being much more understanding and empathetic and much more kinder doctor because she's a woman. And so it seems like, well, this was not this is what you promised and this is what you delivered. It's not the same thing. And I'm not saying that's why people complain. People complain because they were shocked, and it does seem like this was across the board. This wasn't just the fandom menace complaining, if you know what I mean. It was clear. It was substantial enough to, be big on the BBC switchboard, to the point where the BBC actually had to respond and give the explanation of, well, it was supposed to reflect that sometimes, Jodie was speaking for those who were supposed to represent those who are concerned, are compassionate, but they just don't know what they're supposed to say when, the big C is the topic of the big C, the almost unspeakable subject is raised. And some might say, well, that's the problem, is the show is dealing with big themes that it can't really do justice to. The thing is, I have seen people talk about that scene and how it could have been done better. Someone did suggest you could have had that scene maybe at the beginning of the episode, and, same thing, Jodie doesn't know what to say. Then they go through the adventure and that kind of thing and say, well, at the end, we could see Jodie come up with the answer. And they said, how about this? How about she gives Graham this flyer about this future treatment spa, medical spa, on some, advanced, 5,000 years in the future, shall we say, where, medical science is that advanced. And she promises him, if you ever have a remission in your cancer, this is where I'll take you. I'm going to break the rules for you. And that's one brilliant idea. Another really brilliant idea, she could have likened it to, she could have started with, I should say something reassuring, should I? And then she could have talked about the enemy she's faced. The Master, the Daleks, the Cybermen, all these threats to the universe. And talk about how, she's fought them over the centuries, and there's times she's thought she's vanquished them and that they've gone and that no one will ever know the evil of these enemy races again. And she says, and every so often I have to remember that they can return, and often they do return. They come back in force, and I have to fight them again. I have to find the strength to fight them again, even though it sometimes feels like it doesn't matter how many times I fight them, they always come back. I still have to fight them. I have to be strong, fight. And she could have drawn that analogy to cancer. Cancer is like those enemies. We have to be ready for it to return. We have to be ready, vigilant to the idea that it can come back. And we have to be strong and fight it and face it and fight it again. Maybe. And I thought that would have been brilliant. But even for going all that, the scene could have been done. I mean, there was the talk, what if she, the doctor doesn't know what to say? And some people have kind of rightly pointed out, well, they could have just had her say nothing and just say, she could have said, I should say something reassuring, should I? And all she would have to do then is a simple gesture, just putting a supportive hand on Graham's shoulder, just to show, I can't find the words, but I am here for you. It would have been understated. It would have been perfect. And it seems strange that they went the awkward route instead. And that wasn't really the issue to do it on. It was kind of a bad move. I mean, I don't know if I can say that's the reason why the show is doing badly. Like I said, back in the day, the Terminus got a lot of complaints from the Leprosy Society because they felt that it was an insensitive handling of the topic of leprosy. But no one really looks at that as the focal point of when the cancellation began. So it's hard to know why people stopped watching, but I mean, that reaction at least tells you that it gives you something of a reliable sense of audience feedback of, this is where the audience really hated it to the point where they complained. But a lot of people who really hate it will voice their will vote with their remote control and just say, I'm going to stick something else on. There are, dozens of other channels to choose from. Doctor Who just isn't really interesting me anymore. And then for me, I think that's the point. The excitement just isn't there. The excitement that kept people watching just isn't there anymore. And so people just aren't paying attention. I mean, the golden days of the show, when it was really getting huge ratings with Journey's End, Voyage of the Damned, The Day of the Doctor, when, everyone was ringing to Tennant, those days are gone. Those days are a long time ago now. And there's just so much else for people to be into now. It's not the big hot thing anymore. The big hot thing for a while has been instead Avengers. The Avengers, the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. Stuff like that. Sherlock, to a degree. Line of Duty. There's just been so many other things in the market to excite the youth. And, Doctor Who kind of, when it came back, I suppose it kind of took the place of Harry Potter. Before then, Harry Potter had been the big thing. And Doctor Who kind of usurped that, and that became the big thing. Then for a while, Marvel Cinematic Universe became the big thing, and with maybe Twilight on the side. Twilight, I suppose you could say, kind of attracted the more female demographic, I suppose. It's not really got it back, and that's the kind of the issue of how the show gets it back. And it might be just a case that, a lot of people just stopped watching when David Tennant left, and they only really came back when Day of the Doctor happened, and then they left again. Or maybe they just couldn't get into the Peter Capaldi era because it was a bit too convoluted for them. Because, I do remember, for a while when I was, whenever I shopped in Waterstones for Doctor Who stuff, I remember once buying a Doctor Who book sometime after Angels in Manhattan had aired, and the girl behind the cashier desk was this, I think she was a student. She looked like a student. I assume she was a student. And she was saying, yeah, it's not as good anymore, is it? I think it was she was saying that Angels Take Manhattan didn't have the same emotional impact for her as Doomsday did. And so for her, the golden days of the show was when it was David Tennant and Rose, when it was the 10th Doctor and Rose. That was her golden age, and everything since then has kind of paled in comparison. Once that happens, once the audience starts to drift, there is that tricky question of, well, what will get them back? And the big problem, of course, with a show like Doctor Who is, of course, an audience might think, well, I used to be able to, miss an episode of David Tennant and tune in next week and still just about be able to follow it, but now I've kind of stopped watching it as regularly. It was getting convoluted when I stopped watching. And now I feel like if I start watching again, it's just going to be completely ridiculously convoluted. If I tune into a random episode now, I'm probably going to be completely lost. I'm probably going to feel like I've missed so much. Where do I get back into it? And I think the idea of bringing back David Tennant and Catherine Tate it's a reassuring way of saying, you know what, you can probably jump on here and feel like you've missed nothing. You could watch this and feel like it picks up where End of Time left off, or where Journey's End left off. You can watch this and feel like it's a clean new slate, but it's also connected back to the last time you were watching it regularly. And you could probably watch it and feel like you've missed nothing much in between. You can start afresh with it. You can get back into it right here. And, we brought back the very reasons you were into it back in the day. We brought back David Tennant and Catherine Tate. So, on paper, it all should have worked. And yet, we've been looking at the ratings of the two specials, and they've not been much better than Power the Doctor was. And in fact, Wild Blue Yonder has kind of been a dip. Now, this is not the repair job we were hoping for. This is not the resurgence we were hoping for.